Yeah, I get it. What's 1 second? He'll be right back. It's the in 1 second. Let me oh. I think you did that one right. You gotta put it on there, bro. Yep. You good? I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Oh, man. Peace, Nobles. Oh. Peace. Let me get comfortable. Give me a second. Hold on 1 second. Let me check something, family. All right. There we go. Got that for me, baby? Thank you. That's good. Peace, everybody. I hope everybody have an amazing day. Oh, I need that one right here. So I was going to jump on here, man. I had a good teaching today with a couple students on GCU campus today. With a lot of new students that I mentor. Got some young students that's going to be part of my brotherhood of my scholars, young Moorish scholars. We call them the Noble Muftis. But give it a couple seconds, man. I know some of my nobles just got done working out. So it's gonna always like to give a subtopic before I speak. Subtopics are always necessary. So I give everybody a second to log on. Get your pencils and your papers. I'm gonna show a couple books. And then I'm going to be speaking on a book from Sheikh Anta Diop. I'm going to be speaking from a book from Sheikh Anta Diop, just to give us a little history. So I'll give everybody a second to get comfy and log in. 1 second. Yeah, but all through history, it's been planned to confuse, especially to confuse those that need to know exactly who they are in these trying times. So I'm gonna share you something. I like to do the pre-topic before I get into my topic. You ever seen this? This book they send your kids in school about the Battle of Bunker Hill. Anybody ever seen this? Have anybody ever heard of the independence of the King of England throughout the different provinces on July 4th, 1776? We're going to talk about it a little bit. And then we're going to really get into a good teaching. That too, yeah. Yeah. And our temple page. But yeah. So I'll give everybody a second to log in. And then if you ever seen this history, when I say nothing is new. If you're a historian, we must do the work. And we got to stop arguing. Because there's only one history, it's only one law. And we're going to touch on that. We're going to touch on a couple other books. I'm going to narrate to show you some history. But as I open this book right here, 1776, The British Story of the American Revolution, I'm going to break some stuff down to you. I'm going to show you a picture. And I'm going to ask you to pull it up on your computer or anything. And pull up the road to Bunker Hill. Pull that up. The Battle of Bunker Hill. Pull that up while you get a chance. And then I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you how they whitewash all the history books. I did an oral dissertation at Grand Canyon University, standing ovation. So watch as we narrate history so your children can have something to talk about. So your children can know some things instead of just repeating things that people just told them. Watch this. I told y'all until January, I'm going to come back. Every book reading that I do at the college, I come here. I try to offer it to my brothers and sisters, but I know how we be. We don't take pride in wisdom and education and understanding. We don't. I say after all the stuff you read, how your life going? You can't do nothing by yourself. But brothers be trying to do everything on their own, and it don't work. It don't work like that. when two or more gather. So when you get a chance to look at all this historical stuff that all Europeans study on campus, because they ain't nothing but sons of Muslims, and this is what's talked about in academia, I tell our brothers and sisters, they study you to a T. I'm going to one of my Kemetic meetings tomorrow, because I'm an initiate. When I come back, I'm going to show you all some science. But when you look at the road to Bunker Hill, when you look at that tower on Boston North Church on the clear moon night of April 18, 1775, right? Units of the British Army were on the move to destroy the rebel powers, right? Signals across the New England countryside were warning American militia companies. They were warning American militia companies of General Gage's secret intent. The people of Massachusetts were roused. Across the waters of Boston Harbor, Paul Revere, keep that in your name, keep that in your hippocampus, Paul Revere, express rider for the rebels, rode from the town to the opposite Cambridge shore. One lamp was to shine if the British marched across the Boston Neck towards Lexington and Concord. Two indicated that they would be taking the shorter route by boat to Charleston, then marching the 21-mile route from there. Revere was ahead of them. Yeah. Watch this though. The British plan to seize the shores was that outward sign of the tensions which existed by 1775 between the British administration and the American population. Those parliamentary acts provoked by the Boston Tea Party, which had brought economic distress to Massachusetts, had done nothing to reconcile American opinion to the British point of view, though there were hundreds of New England colonists who still looked to George III as their king. I'm setting the highlight for you. Watch how we're going to erase all this pseudo-academia, all this Eurocentric, all this Negrocentric. And then we're going to go even deeper. Executive power in the colony was beginning to move away from the royal assemblies and to be assumed by self-appointed American bodies. Stay with me. The first Continental Congress. That met in Philadelphia in September 1774. And I'm going to teach you all about that, about money. Like, you let people scare you with shit because they not initiate and they poor and broke and they asking for reparations. Negro, blacks, and colors never going to get reparations. When we tell you where them dumbass reparations went, I'm going to tell y'all, Negroes never going to get reparations. That shit went to Section 8, drug programs, cheap-ass education, all that cheap-ass government shit. That's where the niggas' reparations went. Period. Massachusetts, a provincial Congress, had set itself up in Concord as a revolutionary government. Thomas Gage, commander-in-chief of the British forces and governor of Massachusetts, had informed London that it would take 20,000 men to reconquer New England. London might not be sending reinforcements of anything like that scale. Gage had about 3,500 men in Boston. Y'all remember that story, right? I'm setting the precedent. This is what they teach you in school. This true academia right here. If your son write about this in college, he's going to get an A++. And I'm going to show him how to reference it and quote it right and give annotated bibliographies to blow any professor mind. Because they know they be waiting for you to say it. It ain't their job. Paul Revere was not alone. Paul Revere was not alone that night. Okay. Writing the news to the farming communities, Dr. Joseph Warren, soon to be president of the Provincial Congress and living in Boston, had asked a neighbor, William Dawes, to take the land route to Lexington and Concord. Okay. With Revere in the lead at Lexington, rebel leads John Hancock and Sam Adams, staying at a local house, were warned that the British were coming and they might be arrested. Dawes, Revere, and a new recruit, Samuel Prescott, now made for Concord. Not long, the new road, blah, 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 blah. Read that story. Now watch this. because I'm saying blah, blah, blah. Because this is what your kids going to get in school. I know this whole book. I dissected it, studied it, broke it down. I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to fulfill. That's what things is written for, to fulfill. Just because something in the book don't mean it's valid. Now, see this? See, when the European talked about it, Negro was all impressed. And my professors at GCU, Europeans, they was laughing. They was like, well, She Goodman Bay already talked about that. They was like, we don't have to go nowhere else to get science. A European, Alan Beck, had it on his TV show, but I had lectured this shit in college. So, watch this. I lectured it with my nobles. Everything that I did on the university when I was doing my academia endeavors, I came back with my nobles and I taught it. When you research, I always give references of books and things, which I already have. It's the book, The Arab Invasion of Egypt and the Lost 30 Years of Roman Dominion by Alfred Butler. Also, the Aramaic Bible in plain English. But let me break a little bit of this history down. I'm gonna start showing y'all a lot of lectures that I did at college campuses years ago. I got a lot of film, man, that I've done lectures at temples and at different churches and at the Tornado churches in California, all type of stuff. Oh, I have to cut that off. Sorry about that, y'all. But African Americans originally came to America unwillingly, having been stolen and sold by Muslim slave catchers in Africa to Dutch traders journeying to America in 1619. Now, this is, I'm narrating the book. Don't get all caught up. Oh, this is how Negroes be. Yet they have withstood those dark beginnings to become the fiber and the fabric of American society, as President William Howard Taft admirably noted. Do y'all remember him? Their ancestors came here years ago against their will, and now this is their only country and their only flag. They have shown themselves anxious to live for it and to die for it. The story of African Americans is not unlike that of God's chosen people, the Jews. Gotta get some tea. Now remember, the Jews, the Hebrews, I always be showing y'all this all over. It be connected. We just don't understand linguistics, and we be getting caught up in linguistic apartheid with our own people. Originally proposing in their homeland, they were taken to a foreign land where for centuries they lived in slavery until God delivered them and established them in a new land, overcoming their tragic beginnings. African Americans have triumphed and prospered. Or in other words of Joseph, whose brethren sold him into slavery, you intended evil against me, but God turned it for good. That's why when people be talking about speaking the truth, I say, man, I speak the truth on academia. Man, when you speak the good truth, you can die a good death. When you speak the truth and you stand on it, and it's education and academia, it ain't spookism, man, you die a good death. And you live a great life. A great life. James Garfield, America's 20th president, witnessed the final chapter in the deliverance of African Americans from slavery in America. He fought to abolish slavery as a Union general during the Civil War, and afterwards as a member of Congress. Voted for the abolition of slavery and led in the passage of almost 24 civil rights bills. Garfield fought side by side with African Americans during the Civil War. When you research what it's called? I got it in my book. forget the name of the area, but it's talking about the free Israelites. Hebrew Hill. African Americans during the Civil War and after the war. He worked side by side African Americans. First African American congressman to pass those early civil rights bills. President Garfield proudly declared of African Americans. But you know, I'm just quoting the science. With unquestioning devotion to the Union, with a patience and gentleness not born of fear, they have followed the light as God gave them to see the light. The 4-century long story of African American political history truly is an incredible story, but much of the early history is unknown. Watch this. That is why most today know about the last 50 years, like Martin Luther King, all that, Du Bois. I talk about modern history, Malcolm X, all that. But do you understand about the people 3.5 centuries from that history? About the story of Reverend Himram Rose reveals, the first Black U.S. Senator, or that of Joseph Rainey, who overcame slavery to become the first African American elected to the U.S. Congress and to serve as Speaker of the U.S. House, or of John Rock, the first African American admitted to the U.S. Supreme Bar. The reintroduction of this history is long overdue. And speaking of the accomplishments, President John F. Kennedy once observed, "I am certain that it was not easy task to compress into a single volume the American Negro's century-long struggle to win the full promise of the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Such was the case with this work. Indeed, it was no easy task to compress into a single volume. That's why I tell Moors to be students. You can't just get one thing and think you have it. That's not science. That's not science. So let's deal with a little science and setting the record straight. Are we good? Everybody all right? Because this is just the subtopic. Check this out. This real American history. African American history, so much of it's truly unknown today. For example, few know of James Armistead, a Black patriot and spy who helped make possible the 1781 Yorktown victory during the American Revolution that established America as an independent nation, or Peter Salmon. So I just showed you in here what they're gonna give your kids the Battle of Bunker Hill. And you see this picture of Battle of Bunker Hill, how they whitewashed Peter Salmon and Oliver Cromwell out the picture. You don't see them nowhere in there. You don't see them talking about it nowhere in here. But let's finish. Let's finish the dialogue. Or Peter Salmon, a Black patriot who was a hero of the 1775 Battle of Bunker Hill. He also fought as one of the legendary Minutemen and was a soldier at the battles of Saratoga and Stony Point. In fact, a monument was erected to his memory in Massachusetts to commemorate his life and deeds. Man, when I was on the college campus, man, and I found out about the Mau-like tragedies, how they own people, some called Prophet Guru, made them kill all their cattle and all that stuff. Oh man, that shit was sick as hell. And in the famous picture of the 1776 crossing of Delaware on Christmas night, 2 men depicted at the front of the boat included Prince Whipple and Oliver Cromwell, 2 Black patriots who served with George Washington and other American generals during the revolution. Okay, so if that's the case, right? I just showed you in the book you're gonna get in school. Here go the same picture. Where they at? Oliver Cromwell and Peter Salmon, they whitewashed them out of the history books. See, history is deep. And I say, you must be initiated to wisdom. That's why I say, man, all my teachers, all my professors say, man, I hope our people understand before it's too late. Because what I'm doing is a solid. I'm doing my charity work. I'm doing my community work. The people not coming in like they should. But make a long story short, Anyway, so in the picture, I showed you how they whitewashed them, and here they got them in there. You see they circled them? In the original pictures, they're in there. I have them. I just can't go dig them out. Like I'm just going to kick my butt. But few Americans are aware that many of the soldiers who fought during the American Revolution were black. And unlike later segregated regiments in the Civil War, many of the units in American Revolution were fully integrated, with black patriots fighting along and dying side by side their white fellow comrades, especially when you read the history of the Hebrew Hill. While this part of our history is unknown today, Americans knew this information in previous generations. Just like when the flesh gone with me, people can reach back, and college students and even regular people and a few people that scattered on the internet and my muftis, they can reach back and say, hey man, we know about that. Why? From historians like myself, and historians back in that time, like William Neal. He was an award-winning young scholar in Boston during 1830s who studied law and became the first black American to hold a post in the federal government. In 1852, he authored Services of Colored Americans in the Wars of 1776 and 1812. I have all those. And 3 years later, he penned The Colored Patriots of the American Revolution. Despite such extensive works, many of our early black heroes and patriots are unknown today. And equally unknown is much of what occurred in black political history. And I'm saying black, I'm just using the term. We know what it is. So please stay in context. That history will surprise and shock many, but it is a history based on indisputable facts and documents. Too often, only a handful of our heroes from black history are presented, much like showing only a snapshot of 2 out of several albums of photos. Too much information is not presented today, and often too many conclusions are wrongly assumed from the little that is seen. For example, while students in school early learned that the first load of slaves sailed up James River in Virginia in 1619, and thus slavery was introduced into America, few learned about the first slave that arrived in Massachusetts colony set up by the Christian Pilgrims and Puritans. When the slave ships arrived in Massachusetts, the ship's officers were arrested and imprisoned, and the kidnapped slaves were returned to Africa at the colony's expense. That side of history is untold today. A similar omission occurs when the signers of the Declaration of Independence are discussed. For example, if asked to list the slave-only founding fathers among the signers, no one would hesitate to name Thomas Jefferson. But if asked to name a second slave owner from the 56, few other names would be mentioned. And if asked to name anti-slavery leaders who signed the Declaration, probably no one would mention Samuel Adams or Stephen Hopkins or Benjamin Rush or Eldridge Gary or James Wilson or John Adams or Roger Sherman or Benjamin Franklin or John Witherspoon or the many other anti-slavery founders. To identify these individuals, I have to show you pictures and documents from back in the day. We like to call them periodicals. Today, Black history too often is presented just from a Southern viewpoint. You know how they describe slavery and all that stuff, right? The story must not only of the martyrs, but also of the heroes, just as was done by famous Black historians such as William Neal, Carter G. Woodson, Benjamin Quarles, Joseph Wilson, Booker T. Washington, Edward Johnson, and today in the flesh like myself and others that's educated and illuminated and consecrated. One of the world's oldest history books is the Bible, offers a good lesson on the point and affirms the approach taken by these Black historians. All know the Bible story of David's victory over Goliath, yet the Bible also tells the story of David's adultery with Bathsheba and one of his failures with his son Absalom. And if only David and his failures more were mentioned, that would not be the complete story. On the other hand, if only David and his victories were listed, neither would that be the complete story. It takes all sides of the story to see the full, accurate picture, family. So the Bible and early writers in Black history illustrate the principle that the good, the bad, and the ugly must be presented in order to transmit the full story, not only of history in general, family, but of so-called African-American political history in particular. I just want us to know this. I'm setting the narrative. Although the history of Black Americans began so-called in 1619, when you say Black, yeah, we get that. But the arrival of the first slaves in America, the political history of the Black Americans actually begins much later, 1785, the year in which the American political system was constructed, the year in which the Constitution was written. And today, many critics assert that the Constitution was a pro-slavery document. And to prove this, they point to the 3/5 clause, claiming that the Constitution says that Blacks are only 3/5 of a person. One of the earliest Black Americans to investigate the claim was the famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Douglass had been born in slavery and remained a slave until he escaped to New York in 1838. 3 years after his escape, he delivered an anti-slavery speech in Massachusetts. He was promptly hired to work for the state's anti-slavery society, and he also served as a preacher at Zion Methodist Church. During the Civil War, Douglass helped recruit the first Black regiment to fight for the Union. And he advised Abraham Lincoln on the Emancipation Proclamation and other important issues. Following the Civil War, Douglass received presidential appointments from Republican President Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, and James A. Garfield. Democratic President Grover Cleveland removed Frederick Douglass from office, but Republican President Benjamin Harris reappointed him. There's so much history. But let me get to the subject at hand a little bit. What we talking about when they talk about that pro-slavery and that 3/5 clause. I don't want to jump too deep in it, but I want to show you some things. You had many educated brothers, all in politics, doing things. That's why I say we can't let people disrespect the wisdom. We can't do that. Then that says that we're not American. I don't want to stay all in the book. Reverend Richard Allen, Reverend Henry Garrett, Hiram Reeves, Joseph Rainey, Frederick Douglass, John Lynch, John Rock, Jefferson Long. I mean, it's too many. And even, like I say, I love our Prophet Noble Drew Ali, but I'm in the flesh. I can add on. I don't destroy. I give all credit, and peace be among everybody. But when we correct our teachings, we must. We must do that. We can't come from no biasness, because history can't be biased. You see how the European always put their hand inside their jacket like they got some secret? All through history. I'm going to show you, because they all sons of Muslims. I'm telling you, you think it's something scary. They have no power, especially if you illuminated and enlightened like myself and those others. They scare no ghosts. So I'm going to show you. I just want to show you all some books. And I'm going to get into it. And I saw somebody, I shared it with my muftis. Somebody always trying to, our own people always try to discredit stuff and make themselves look stupid. When they was talking about Empress Verdice, Tierra, Washington, Turner, Gosson, L, saying about the ancient ones and all that. And then they tried to input their own little piece, talk about some sovereign citizen shit. Man, ain't nobody think about no European, no Negro sovereign or no sovereign citizen crap. That's an oxymoron. We don't teach that shit. That's some clown shit. And none of us teach that trash. We Americans, Moorish Americans. That's exactly who I am. Without a doubt, without a contradiction. I ain't saying, man is not from Africa, but everybody's not from Africa per se. I know where I'm from. And I ain't gonna have that discussion with nobody. And so my main topic, I'm gonna lecture on this little book on Sheikh Anta Diop. When I saw a lecture of Dr. John Henry Clark, right? And he was talking about the African origins of Asia and just the African per se. And one of my friends that I deal with, Smart brother, him and his empress, they like to study. And she was like, "She, isn't it sad how our people try to discredit our scholars after all the work?" And I'm like, "What you mean?" And they were talking about a brother, some Moors discussion, trying to discredit John Henry Clark. And I said, man, Negroes will watch 15,000 YouTube videos and act like they know something, and they fucking life be in shambles. They never did nothing. And to watch a YouTube video and argue over this and that, but bums in real life and living off the government and act like they so heavy and not part of no brotherhood or nothing. And to go to jail and cry and be begging and get court-appointed attorneys, all that shit. And then discredit our scholars. And I say, man, we're supposed to be adding on to it because it's nothing to discredit. So, all these books by Cheikh Anta Diop, which I ask a lot of brothers when they be debating things or not even debating, talking about stuff, they have no idea. I asked them, have they ever done anthropology? And they said, no. I said, well, have you ever done Carmen Dayton? No. Do you know linguistics? No. So we just pick up things and say, this is that, because you have some motive and don't know who Cheikh Anta Diop is. And don't know who Cheikh Anta Diop is. This be the sad part about us. When I be like, man, our brothers, man, we have a mental problem. We really do. We really do. When it comes down to this academia. And I say, well, how can a brother really have something to say? And if a person's profession is academia and research and study and science and narcissism, and another person, I just say they go to work every day and they come home and they watch basketball, they do all this and they do that and that's their job. And they watch videos all day and they ain't part of a brotherhood. They have nobody, no teachings or nothing. What is that all about? Because people don't have time. So they live under their means. And that's what I tell people what's different from me and them. I say, a lot of people work so hard, they got to work so hard till they die. Because they don't work their brain. And they don't want to be a part of nothing. So I hope you get your pencils and your papers. I'm going to give y'all some books before I get into it. Y'all know who Pio Gama is? Pio Gama. Piogama. Pio Gama Pinto. He was Kenya's martyr. (1927–1965). Also, Cheikh Anta Diop got a book called Cultural Unity of Black Africa. I think I sent that to my muftis. Right, Moors? I'm just highlighting a whole bunch of history as I'm narrating the lecture. There's a lot of stuff I don't have too much time to talk about, but when I'm on campus, man, we be for like 3 hours and it be packed. Research Sir George Gray's. Research that. Research the imperialism of cultural assimilation. Sir George Gray's encounter with the Maori, the MAU or the MAORI, and the Hyksos, the Hyksos, the XHOSA. That was in 1845 and 1868. Research this stuff. Research the XHOSA cattle killings and the politics of memory. I'm just setting the stage for you. gotta get comfortable for this one. I gotta get comfortable for this part. Empress, I gotta get comfortable for this part, girl. Muscles getting bigger. So I'm going to narrate Cheikh Anta Diop and the new light on African history. Now remember, Cheikh Anta Diop, a lot of his lectures, a lot of his books was in Latin, a different language. So John Henry Clark narrated. I'm telling you, man. And the Europeans tried to discredit Cheikh Anta Diop, couldn't do it. They tried, and now here we go. We got our own brothers that to jump their goofy ass on the internet and try to discredit our brothers. And I say, man, your understanding is tittle. That's a miscule. We don't diss wisdom. We add on to it. So let's build. Cheikh Anta Diop, one of the most able of present-day scholars writing about Africa, is also one of the greatest living Black historians, peace be upon him. His first major work, Nations, Negroes, and Culture, in 1955, I got all that, is still disturbing the white historians who have made quick reputations as authorities on African history and culture. In this book, Diop shows the interrelationships between African nations, North and South, and proved because, in this case, proof is needed again and again that ancient Egypt was a distinct African nation and was not historically or culturally a part of Asia or Europe. Understand that. Stay in context, please. More myths about Africa are put to rest in another one of his books, The Cultural Unity of the Negro Africa, in 1956. The publication of his first book in the United States, The African Origins of Civilization. This was his first published book in the United States. This was his first published book in the United States. All my muftis have it. So you don't have to go and buy nobody else to get all your literature. Why? Why would you? The African Origin of Civilization, Myths of Reality, is a cause for celebration. The book and others of recent years, all by Black writers, have called for a total reconsideration of the role that African people have played in history and their impact and the development of early societies and institutions. See, that's what it's all about, institutions. Because once all this internet be gone, they can shut this off in a minute. Where you gonna learn that? Nobody's not initiated and illuminated to have institutions, and then the common people don't support the ones that's building real institutions and that have real academia and that can teach history, law, civics, finances, agriculture, etc. That's anointed and consecrated. That's a pillar in multiple communities. I thought that's what we want. We should. But Cheikh Anta Diop was born in the town of Debrel in Senegal on the west coast of Africa in 1923. His birthplace has a long tradition of producing Muslim scholars and oral historians. This is where his inspiration and interest in history, the humanities, and social sciences from an African point of view began. Same with me. My makeup. After the publication of his first book, Nations, Negroes, and Culture, that had been rejected as a PhD thesis at the Sorbonne in Paris, he became one of the most controversial of present-day African historians. Nations, Negroes, and Culture is both a reassessment of the African past and a challenge to the Western scholarship of Africa. He refutes the myth of Egypt as a white nation and shows its Southern African origins. It is his intention to prove that through Egyptian civilization, Africa had made the oldest and one of the most significant contributions to the world cultures. This is not a new argument. Oh, thanks for the donation, Maury. Yeah, but if y'all like the teachings, you have this Cash App $ KG Bay. If you have it on your heart, gratitude. If not, when you have it on your heart, I understand. But this is not a new argument that started with Cheikh Anta Diop's generation of Africans. The Ghanaian historian Joseph B. Danquah Danquah, in its introduction to the book. And I have this too, write these books down. United West African at the Bar of the Family of Nations by Ladipo Solanke, published in 1927. 4 years after Sheikh Anta Diop was born, he said exactly the same thing. His statement reads, and I quote, "This is 4 years after he was born, 4 years after Sheikh Anta Diop was born. By the time Alexander the Great was sweeping the civilized world with conquest after conquest, from Syriana to Gaza, from Babylon to Kabul, by the time the first Aryan conquerors were learning the rudiments of war and government at the feet of the philosopher Aristotle," because you know where Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle came from. When I played the lecture of our elder, peace be upon him, Stephen Coakley, Stolen Legacy, y'all can get that book from me too. This is no secret. And by the time Athens was laying down the foundations of European civilization, the earliest and greatest Ethiopian culture had already flourished and dominated the civilized world for over 4 centuries and a half. Family Imperial Ethiopia had conquered Egypt and founded the 25th dynasty. And for a century and a half, the central seat of civilization is the known world was held by the ancestors of the modern Negro, maintaining and defending its Assyrian and Persian empires of the East. Thus, the time when Ethiopia was leading the civilized world in culture and conquest, East was East, but West was not. And the first European, the Grecian Olympiad, was yet to be held. Rome was nowhere to be seen on the map, and 16 centuries were passed before Charlemagne would rule in Egypt, and Egbert became the first king of England. Even then, history was to drag on for another 700 weary years before the Roman Catholic Europe could see fit to end the great scheme, soon to be followed by the disturbing news of the discovery of America and the fateful rebirth of the youngest of world civilizations. See? Showing that African history is the foundation of the world history in the present book by Sheikh Anta Diop and in the most of his other works. His objective is the same. And in the first major work on history, Dr. Diop said, the general problem confronting African history is this: how to recognize effectively, through meaningful research, all of the fragments of the past into a single ancient epoch, a common origin which will reestablish African continuity. If the ancients were not victims of a mirage, it should be easily enough to draw upon another series of arguments and proof for the union of history of Ethiopian and Egyptian societies with the rest of Africa. Thus, combined, the histories will lead to a properly patterned past, in which it would be seen that the ancient Ghana rose in the interior, which is West Africa, of the continent at the moment of the Egyptian decline, just as the Western European empires were born with the decline of Rome. Man, it's a book called Judah Trembles of the Rome. Our same brother who wrote From Babylon to Timbuktu. While using Africa as the vantage point and the basis for his thesis, Dr. Diop does not neglect the broader dimensions of history. He shows that history cannot be restricted by the limits of ethnic group, nations, or culture. Roman history is Greek as well as Roman, and both the Greek and the Roman histories are Egyptian because the entire Mediterranean was civilized Egypt, and Egypt in turn borrowed from other parts of Africa, especially Ethiopia. Oh, I forgot to get that other book he got. Oh, it's in there. It's called Barbarians. I'll show you. I'll get it. And so you see the map, you see Morocco, Algeria, West Sahara, Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Chad or Cad, Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, Zambia, all these areas. Look at Africa, the continent. Look for yourself. Don't let nobody break you up. You let somebody just put a line down on you and call you this. No, man, we're not going to do that. And then diss our scholars. No, man, we ain't going to do that. We ain't going to do that. Got all the for my nobles. I think my nobles should have all. And I just showed you the map. Africa came into the Mediterranean world mainly through Greece, which had been under African influence. The first Greek invasion of Africa was peaceful and scholarly. The invasion brought Herodotus. Egypt had lost its independence over a century before his visit. This was the beginning of the period of the foreign domination over Egypt that would last in different forms for 2,000 years. The African origin of civilization myth reality is one volume translation of the major section of the first and last of the books by Sheikh Anta Diop. The book Nations and Negroes, Culture, Civilizations, and these two works have challenged and changed the directions, the attitudes about the place of Africa, the history and all that, in scholarly circles around the world. It was largely due to these works that Sheikh Anta Diop, with W.E.B. Du Bois, was honored as the writer who had exerted the greatest influence on African people in the 20th century at the World Festival of Arts held in Dakar, Senegal in 1966. The main thesis of the present work is a redefinition of the place of Egypt in Africa. History is particular, and in world history in general. Dr. Diop calls attention to the historical, the archaeological, and the anthropological evidence that supports his thesis. The civilization of Egypt, he maintains, is African in origin and in early development. And in his book, Dr. Diop says, the history of Africa will remain suspended in the air and cannot be written correctly until African historians connect it with history of Egypt. He further states, the African historian who evades the problem of Egypt is neither modest or objective, nor unruffled. He is ignorant, cowardly, and neurotic. Dr. Diop approaches the history of African frontally, head-on, with explanations, but no apologies. In locating Egypt on the map of human geography, he asks and answers the question, who were the Egyptians of the ancient world? The Ethiopian says that the Egyptians were one of the colonies which was brought into Egypt by the deity Osiris. The Greek writer Herodotus repeatedly referred to the Egyptians as being dark-skinned people with woolly hair. They, he says, have the same tint of skin which approaches that of the Ethiopians. The opinion of the ancient writers on the Egyptians is more or less summed up by Gaston Maspero in 1846 and 1916 when he says, and I quote, by the almost unanimous testimony of ancient historians, they, the Egyptians, belong to an African race which first settled in Ethiopia on the Middle Nile. Following the course of the river, they gradually reached the Greek writer Herodotus. May be mistaken. Sheikh Anta Diop tells us when he reports the customs of a people, but one must grant that he was at least capable of recognizing the skin color of the inhabitants of countries he visited. His descriptions of the of the Egyptians were the descriptions of a black people. At this point, the reader needs to be reminded of the fact that at the time of Herodotus' visit to Egypt and other parts of Africa between 480 and 425 BC, Egypt's golden age was over. Egypt had suffered from several invasions, mainly the Kushite invasions coming from within Africa and starting in 1751 BC, and the Assyrians invasion from Western Asia, called the Middle East, starting in 671 BC. And if Egypt, after years of invasion by other people and nations, was a distinct black African nation at the time of Herodotus, shouldn't we at least assume that it was more so before these invasions occurred? And if Egypt is a dilemma in Western historiography, it is created dilemma. The Western historians in most cases have rested the foundation of what is called Western civilization on the false assumptions or claim that the ancient Egyptians were white people. To do this, they had to ignore the great masterpieces on Egyptian history writing by other white historians. who did not support this point of view, such as Gerald Massey in his great classic, The Ancient Egypt, The Light of the World, in 1907. Also, Sign the Symbol of the Primordial Man by Albert Churchward. All his books. The Light of the World, 1907, and his works, A Book of the Beginnings and the Natural Genesis. Other neglected works by white writers, and Politics, Intercourse, and Trade of Carthaginians, Ethiopian, Egyptians by A.H.L. Herian in 1833, and Ruins of Empires by Count Vonley in 1787. I did my oral dissertation on this. Got a standing ovation. That's why I said, they my son, and no disrespect. I say that with pride and with honor. And I wear my fez with honor. In the first chapter of the book, Dr. Diop refers to the Southern African origins of the people, later known as Egyptians. Here, he is on sound ground with a lot of support coming from another group of neglected white writers. In his book, Egypt, Sir E.A. Wallace Budge says, the prehistoric native of Egypt, both in the Old and in the New Stone Ages, was African, and there is every reason for saying that the earliest settlers came from the South. He further states, there are many things in the manners and customs and religions of the historic Egyptians that suggest that the original home of their prehistoric ancestors was in a country in the neighborhood of Uganda and Punt. Some historians believe that the biblical land of Punt was in the area known on modern maps as Somalia. European interest in Ethiopia and the origin of civilization dates from the early part of the 19th century and is best reflected in a little known, though important paper in Carl Richard's Lipsius. Carl Richard, Lepsius, is called the Incomparable Survey of the Monumental Ruins in the Ethiopian Nile Valley in 1842 and 1844. I have all that. The records found by Lipsius tend to show how Ethiopia was once able to sustain an ancient population that was numerous and powerful enough not only to challenge, but on a number of occasions to conquer completely the populous land of Egypt. And these records show that the antiquity of Ethiopian civilization had a direct link with civilizations of ancient Egypt. And many of the leading antiquarians of that time based largely on the strength of what the classical authors, particularly Diodorus Siculus and Stephanus of Byzantium, had to say on the matter, were exponents of the view that the ancient Ethiopians, or at that any rate, that the black people of remote antiquity were the earliest of all civilized people, and that the first civilized inhabitants of ancient Egypt were members of what is referred to as the black race who entered the country as immigrants from Ethiopia. A number of Europe's leading writers on the civilizations of remote antiquity have written brilliant defenses of the point of view. Some of these writers are Bryce, Count Vonley, Fabry, D'Oliver, and Henren, Heeren. And in spite of the fact that these writers defended the thesis with all the learning at their command and documented their defense, most of the present-day writers of African history continue to ignore their findings. Now, why? Now, why would you rock with any Negro and every European to agree with it? What are they talking about? Sad. You're talking about a whole bunch of shade tree mechanics. In 1825, German backwardness in this respect came definitely to an end in that year. Arnold Herman, Heeren, 1760, 1842. I'm thankful for the donation, Noble. Who was that? I don't know. Some Noble sent me 100 gratitude. Oh, I think this Noble was watching my lecture the other day. I sent you some books. He was like, man, that book on Amazon, $200. He was like, man, I only sent you 10. So he just sent me some gratitude. But man, I do that for anybody, man. It's no problem. But even the European professor of history and politics in the University of Göttingen, and one of the ablest of the early exponents of the economic interpretation of history, published in the fourth and revised edition of his great work, Ideen, Uber, Die, Politik, Den Verdict, Unden, Den, Handel, Den Vernomisten. That's a German. But it's a lengthy essay. And like it's an essay, it's probably like 1,000 pages. Like literally. But when I say 1,000 pages, and man, my empress right here, she attests. Like when I was used to do all my research papers, and I had to write an APA format, I had to put it in Anatolia bibliography. I had to do so much research. But I love to study. I love to read. I'll take a book, read it, a 400-page book in one day, have so many notes to where the teacher be like, man, this is the whole damn book, broke down every chapter, note for note for note. Like any student can take that. Don't even need the book. Just need my notes. They can pass anything. Ask my empress. When I got my bachelor's degree in business, anybody can take all my notes that I took in every class, stats, micro, macro, take all the science and pass. But you got to know it because you have to do capstones. But make a long story short. But the essay is long of the history, the culture, and the commerce of the ancient Ethiopians, which have profound influence on contemporary writers in the conclusion that it was among these ancient black people of Africa and Asia that international trade was first developed. He thinks that as byproduct of these international contacts, there was an exchange of ideas and cultural practices that laid the foundations of the earliest civilizations of the ancient world. The French writer Count C.F. Volney, Volney, Count as Count Dracula, C.F. Volney, in his important work, The Ruins of Empires, extends this point of view by saying that the Egyptians were the first people to attain the physical and moral sciences necessary to civilize life. In referring to the basis of this achievement, he states further that it was then on the borders of the Upper Nile, among a black race of men, that was organized the complicated system of worship of the stars, astrology, astronomy, considered in relation to the productions of the earth and the labors of the agriculture. And this first worship, characterized by the adoration under their own forms and national attributes, were the simple proceeding of the human mind. Over a generation ago, African-American historians such as Carter G. Woodson, W.E.B. Du Bois, Willis N. Nuggins, J.A. Rogers, and Charles C. Seaford, and even all the brothers that I showed you in politics in here, that they whitewashed out of the Battle of Bunker Hill, that I show you. Du Bois, Willis and Huggins, J.A. Rogers, Charles C. Seaford. Read the works of these racial writer historians and begin to expand on their findings. And it's like when I was in academia, a lot of Europeans, when I was showing them pictures of J.A. Rogers and Carter G. Woodson's and all of them, they were so high yellow, man. I'm talking about the Boule was in the early days, but that's a whole nother story. You have to be initiated to be able to talk. From education, from no spookism. I tell you, when you speak the truth and you stand on the truth, you can die a great death. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you what I know, what I understand, what I believe in, and what I stand on at all times. When you stand on truth and wisdom and honor and the noble, man, you can die a good death, an honorable death with no problem. And this tradition continued and is reflected in the works of present day Black historians such as John G. Jackson, The Introduction to African Civilization, 1970, or Yosef Ben Jochanan, The Black Man of the Nile, 1972, and Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization. We don't destroy what they talk on. We build, we add on, because there's much add on to add on. If all these brothers wrote this stuff in the 70s and we in the flesh, we don't destroy nothing them brothers were saying. We add on to the science. And that's why I can't deal with goofy Negroes. The destruction of Black civilization, the great issues of a race from 4500 BC to 2000 AD, 1971. These brothers wrote this shit in the 70s. A lot of these brothers was fucking babies or wasn't even born and didn't want to criticize all them years of work. Man, they need to go sit their retarded ass down somewhere. Negroes scared of their own shadow. They can't go nowhere, and the doors and the sea be parted for them. They can't go nowhere. They can't go in academia all over the world and go in. They can't go to a government official buildings and Masonic temples and be let in with love from all the lower level Masons. They can't do that. They'll be out there in the cold making goofy ass videos on YouTube. Until the publication of James G. Shaddy's article, Nigritude, Pan Bingritude, and the Diapan Philosophy of African History in a current bibliography on African Affairs, Volume 5, January 1st, 1972, and the recent interview by Heron Kofi Wangagar, published in Black World Magazine, February 1974. Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop was known to only a small group of Black writers and teachers in the United States. And today, most Negroes don't know who Cheikh Anta Diop is. For over 7 years, his books were offered to American publishers with no show of interest. Now 2 of his books will be published in the United States within 1 year. The Third World Press in Chicago is preparing to publish his book, The Cultural Unity of Negro Africa. But I got them all. Just like I tell people, man, I don't have to sell out. I don't have to go have no publishing company. Man, I got a degree in business. I know how to do it. I know how to self-publish. I don't have to put my stuff on Amazon. I have my own platform, mypdfbooks.com. I have my own platform where I sell all my material, hats and Moorish American regalia, moorishhaberdashery.com. That's what I do this for. You know? So when a person say, man, you put your books on Amazon, hell no. For what? Can nobody fire me? I don't need to put my stuff. I'd rather it take the time that I needed to take to build my own. And that's what I use my money for, to build my own platform. Just like if I was doing music, I'd build my own platform. If the internet shit shut down, I don't give a shit. I have my own institution. Zoom would never be shut down. This shit can be shut down. I know how to do meetings. That's nothing. I author my own books. The Cultural Unity of the Negro Africa. All of his books were originally published by Presence African, the Paris-based publication arm of the International Society of African Culture. They own people. Just like when Noble Drew Ali had to have their own newspaper, everybody have to have their own. That's what I'm telling you. I don't understand why we don't deal with academia. And today, if you want to learn, we right here. The so-called Egyptology developed in the concurrent with the development of the slave trade and the colonial system. It was during this period that Egypt was literally taken out of Africa academically and made an extension of Europe. In many ways, Egypt is the key to ancient African history. African history is out of kilter until ancient Egypt is looked upon as a distant African nation. The Nile River played a major role in the relationship to Egypt, to the nations in South Africa. During the early history of Africa, the Nile was a great cultural highway on which establishments of civilization came into and out of inner Africa. Egypt's relationship with the people in the South was both good and bad, depending on the period and the dynasty in power. In this chapter called What Were the Egyptians?, Dr. Diop explains the rise and fall of Egypt's golden age and the beginning of the invasions, first from Western Asia, that turned their nation's first age of greatness into a nightmare. And this was the period of the Hyksos, or shepherd kings. And during this time, 70 Jews, grouped in 12 patriarchal families, nomads without industry or culture, entered Egypt. These Jews left Egypt 400 years later, 600,000 strong, after acquiring from African people all of the elements of their future religion, tradition, culture, including monotheism. Whosoever the Jews were, when they entered Africa, when they left 400 years later, they were ethnically, culturally, religiously, an African people. In this part of the book, Cheikh Anta Diop leaves no room for argument. In the chapter called Birth of the Negro Myth, Dr. Diop shows how African people who civilized were old before Europe was born, were systematically Read out of the respectful commentary of human history. Thus, examination is considered in the chapter called Modern Falsification of History, where Sheikh Anta Diop deals with how Western historians from the last 500 years wrote or rewrote history, glorifying the people of European extraction and distorted the history of the rest of the world. Those who read this science are in for a shock when you research all this history. And I challenge you to get all the books that I quoted, The African Origins of Civilization. Research who Sheikh Anta Diop is. Do some scholarship and get out of the hate, man, and get into study. So that's my little presentation for the night, man. I give y'all gratitude for listening to me, man, for taking time out y'all day. I give those gratitude for those that sent the donation to Cash App $KG Bay. I give you gratitude. I really, really wish more would come to class, man. Because I promise you, you will learn. And don't sit and just watch as we continue to build. And as we continue to grow. Don't just watch, support something. I mean, it takes your time, your finances, your wisdom, those that's into the science like you, share it with them. This science shouldn't make you mad, and nobody owe you nothing. We owe everything to ourselves. This world don't owe us nothing. We should want to correct understanding, right? And so that's why I challenge Moors to not only study and read, but to learn. And come to class and learn. Like all these books and stuff, we have book club, man, 7 days a week. We do more stuff. Like, I don't know if anybody read ISIS papers, but these are a lot of books that I have for Moors. I'm just showing y'all before I leave because I got 10 more minutes. I like my time. I'm weird like that. Remember I was telling y'all about Stolen Legacy? All these books you can download on your tablet. Go to Office Max or Staples, and they'll print them and bind them for you. Chancellor Wilson, Destruction of a Black Civilization. Let's show y'all a couple books. The Miseducation of the Negro. Now, you know, he also wrote a book, The Education of the Negro, as well. A lot of Moors didn't know that. They're like, what you mean, Sheikh? I said, yeah. He also have a book, it's called The Education of the Negro prior to 1861 by Carter G. Woodson as well. It's right there. You just download them on your tablet, or you go to Office Max and Staples. They'll print them and bind them for you. This one of the books, one of the students, he's going to GCU for Christian education. I got him this book. A lot of stuff, as they learn, they write from scholarship. When I say, we're not going to let nobody say where you wasn't at, boy, you were all over the world. So we're going to show that. Even the book, Russia Icon, that I got that cost thousands of dollars. Moors could have been got from us. And students and everybody else that get books from me, they be laughing like, pfft. And I'll be laughing too. That's another one of Sheikh Anta Diop books. Oh, the Antediluvian World of Atlantis. Oh yeah, that's a good read too. What's that? The Golden Dawn. But yeah, man, I just wanted to show, a little literature for Moors, man, that you don't have to go other places and get your books and things. You can get them from your brother. And then this is John Henry Clark book. And it becomes like an NFT because you have it forever. on your tablet and your email. You can print it and bind it anytime you want to. No one travel with a whole bunch of books in a backpack. You can have all your books on your tablet or whatever you like, and you can print anything at your leisure. Man, when I have your library so packed with scholarship. That's one of Dr. Ben books. Just like for one or two of these books that you would pay on Amazon, man, you'll get 10 of them from me. And that's just the gods of Northern Buddhism. We are research the gods of Northern Buddhism. Look at that. This is old. And I played the film on that too. Let's see if I got the old. A lot of the files are big, and some of them have a lot of amazing pictures. This one to open real fast. But yeah, man, that's what I wanted to show y'all. So I give y'all gratitude for everybody that took time out their day. I hope y'all enjoyed the teachings. I hope you learned something. Yep. But with that being said, y'all know how to get with me. Check out our Temple and School webpage, bbtsciencetemple.com. Check out our book company, My PDF Books. That's books with a Z. And check out our company, MoorishHaberdasher.com, where you can get all your Moorish American regalia and much, much more. That's MoorishHaberdasher.com. But like I said, man, studying and reading is fundamental. And I would love for you to be my guest and come to class. On Saturday, we have a DAP class at 10:30 a.m. AZ time zone, privately on Zoom. And on Sunday, we have Sunday school at 2 p.m. AZ time zone, privately on Zoom. And during those times, we really teach the science. Oh, let me show y'all this before I leave. Practicing. You're practicing. So, this in our class, I'm gonna break down this whole chart, and I'm gonna pertain it to the body and the cosmos. I'm gonna break it down real easy. Every symbol on here, I'm gonna break it down to show you there's nothing scary. Matter of fact, watch this. When I show you this is nothing scary, when I show you Eliseus Levi is nothing but a transcriber, when I show you that the Baphomet is written Kabbalistically, we don't even know what Kol Volta means, we don't know what that means in the chalice, we don't see all that symbology in the head and all that symbology, you think it's something scary. Nothing scary at all. And I'm going to break down this chart. All this symbology. You see Mayat, you see the wing, you see in the medical field, you see all that. That symbology, what I just showed you, in Eliseus Levi of the Baphomet, that's written Kabbalistically, which is Tempo as Abba. I'm going to break this whole chart down, man. All that symbology, when I say belong to the ancient ones, and you must be illuminated and consecrated. All this symbology. It's all science and signs and symbols. See that? But peace out, family.